You're about to learn the secret history of the trans movement. There have always been people with unique views on gender, but until recently, they've been an infinitesimal percentage of the population. Then in 2014, the trans movement exploded under the second administration of Barack Obama, and suddenly everyone was trans-friendly, or else. How did this happen? Spoiler alert, it didn't happen by itself. Another epic deep dive by Brass Check. So today, we're really diving into how this shift, this explosion as they call it, happened. We're looking at sources that propose a narrative quite different from maybe the one most people assume. These documents we've looked at, they argue that what seems like a recent sort of organic social change is actually, well, the result of some very deep-rooted and interconnected forces, financial, political, industrial. Our mission today is basically to walk you through these claims, trace the connections the sources highlight, and just give you that perspective. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, what's really fascinating, I think, is just how many different threads the sources pull together here. Things that seem totally separate. We're talking, you know, digging into old family money, political chess moves, even big shifts in, like, the pharmaceutical world. It's about trying to paint that comprehensive picture, the why and how, behind such a big societal shift, at least according to these materials we're looking at.
Absolutely. And to really get into this narrative, the sources say we have to start with one specific family, the Pritzkers. And specifically Jennifer Natalia Pritzker, who you might also know as James Nicholas Pritzker. The documents point to Jennifer Pritzker as a really significant financial backer for LGBTQ plus causes, putting in millions, apparently starting way back in 1995. And they note that around 2013, Jennifer Pritzker began publicly wearing a dress. A personal transition, yes, but the sources sort of imply it ties into this larger picture.
And to grasp the scale of that financial clout, the sources take us way back to the roots of the Pritzker fortune. It starts with Abram Nicholas Pritzker, Abe Pritzker, born 1896, died 86. Now, according to these accounts, Abe was a tax attorney in Chicago for the Outfit.
The Outfit, like the Chicago mob.
Exactly, the city's big organized crime syndicate. And the sources stress that the Outfit learned a lesson from Al Capone, you know, getting nabbed for tax evasion. So while people might think of Meyer Lansky as the mob's banker, these sources actually contrast him with Abe Pritzker. They call Pritzker the smart money man.
Really? How so?
Well, they claim Lansky was maybe not the best banker, whereas Abe's job was specifically and expertly making dirty money clean. We're not just talking hiding cash. It was complex financial structures, investment strategies, and this, the sources claim, gave the family abundant and steady access to capital from, well, illicit sources, which they then plowed into legitimate businesses.
Like what kind of businesses?
Banking, real estate, some industrial companies described as sort of arcane but lucrative, and importantly, hospitality, which of course led to the Hyatt hotel chain. It's interesting, too, they mentioned that pretty much everything except the Hyatt chain was eventually sold off to Warren Buffett. Took 100% ownership.
Wow. That's quite the foundation story for a major family fortune.
Yeah.
And the sources add another layer to this, something about real estate.
Yeah, this is where, according to the sources, it gets really interesting. They talk about how Abe Pritzker acquired valuable commercial real estate at what they call forced sale prices. During World War II, FDR's Executive Order 9095 set up the Office of Alien Property, the OAP. Now, these sources claim this office just sort of hoovered up tons of property from Japanese Americans, loyal third-generation citizens.
So we're put in internment camps.
Exactly. People owning diners, shops, homes. They were imprisoned, and the OAP took their assets, selling them off cheap pennies on the dollar, essentially. And who, according to these documents, shows up with bags of Chicago cash to buy up all this real estate from the feds.
Abe Pritzker.
That's the claim. It paints a picture of wealth accumulation tied directly to these, well, extraordinary and frankly tragic wartime circumstances. A real intersection of policy and private profit.
Okay, so we've got these deep, controversial financial roots established by the sources. Let's pivot back to the more recent picture. How do they connect this family influence to LGBTQ plus groups and the rise of trans initiatives?
Right. So the sources state pretty clearly that through Jennifer Pritzker and also the Ford Foundation and other big donors, funding for established LGBTQ plus groups took a sharp turn. Earmarked donations, they say, suddenly switched from zero to trans programs, and not just a little bit.
How much are we talking?
They claim it quickly jumped to 30% or even more of the total donations for some groups. And this effectively forced these organizations, that's the word used, to create new trans-specific programs.
Forced them how? Like, if they wanted the money, they had to.
Basically, yeah. The implication is, if you wanted to keep that significant funding flowing, you needed to align with this new focus on trans issues. And because trans people are, numerically a pretty small group, a lot of that funding, according to the sources, went into public education.
Public education meaning?
Things like media campaigns, pushing for changes in school curricula, general awareness stuff, all designed to increase acceptance and understanding of trans identities. But it's also mentioned that inside some of these LGBTQ plus organizations, this big push wasn't universally popular.
Oh.
Yeah, the sources mentioned some people involved privately felt it was, well, total nonsense, or at least misguided. It felt to some less like grassroots growth and more like a top-down thing driven by the funders.
That's a potent claim, funding dictating the direction of a social movement. And this is where the politics come in, specifically Barack Obama.
Exactly. The sources connect this financial leverage directly to the political sphere. And yeah, they bring up Obama. They actually describe him as a creature of the Chicago Pritzker family, pointing to Penny Pritzker, who was key to his career and then became his Secretary of Commerce from 2013 to 2017.
A reward, the sources imply.
That's the explicit description, yeah. A reward for her support. And they claim Obama's public stance on the trans community, their quotes changed significantly in 2014. This was, they argue, after years where he privately perhaps was more mocking or dismissive. But then 2014 happened.
Yeah, and what specifically changed?
He apparently got on board big time. Specific actions mentioned are an executive order mandating federal contractors bow to the gender identity of their employees. And the sources really highlight the timing this happens while Penny Pritzker, his major backer from this powerful family, is his commerce secretary.
That's quite a connection they're drawing.
And there's more. He also announced the first official Transgender Day of Remembrance, with ceremonial bells tolling and everything. So what the sources are suggesting here is a direct line between a powerful family's focus, their financial clout, and a pretty dramatic shift in federal policy and public recognition.
Okay, so we have this picture emerging: financial power, direct political influence. But the sources argue there's more to it, a broader infrastructure.
Yeah, they suggest this didn't just happen because of those immediate connections. They argue there was a deeper kind of long-term political infrastructure that had been built up over decades, ready to support these kinds of changes.
And where does that thread start?
It goes back to Chicago, post-World War II. Remember those empty Japanese-American homes and businesses we talked about?
Right, after the internment and the OAP sales?
Well, the sources describe a major migration of Black communities, mostly coming up from Texas, moving into those very spaces. They came largely for work, especially in the shipyards. And naturally, entrepreneurs popped up to serve these new communities: restaurants, hotels, music clubs, and yeah, gambling joints too. It's that classic story of community building in new circumstances.
Okay, and how does this connect to the political infrastructure idea?
Well, one figure who emerges from this environment, according to the sources, is a young Willie Brown.
Willie Brown, the California politician.
The very same. The sources paint this picture of him as a kid working a shoeshine stand, but also acting as a lookout for his uncle's gambling spot. So he grew up immersed in that world, community dynamics, power, how things really worked, and they claim he developed his political skills and connections there. And here's the key part. The sources assert that Willie Brown then spent decades recruiting, training, essentially raising up a whole generation of major political figures.
Yes, who?
They name names: Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris. Big names. And the sources use this really strong phrase. They call these individuals part of the political shock troops.
Shock troops. Wow.
Yeah, shock troops who, the sources claim, made sure the trans thing went down.
So the argument is it wasn't just the immediate Pritzker-Obama connection, but this longer-term network was also activated.
That's the implication. A multi-pronged approach. Direct funding, top-level political alignment, and this cultivated network of influential politicians ready to push the agenda. It suggests a real long game in political influence.
That's a profound claim about how political change happens over time.
Right.
Okay, so we have money, politics, infrastructure.
Yeah.
What's the final piece the sources bring in? You mentioned the pharmaceutical industry earlier.
Right. Big pharma. And to understand their alleged role, the sources ask you to think back to something else. Hormone replacement therapy, HRT, for women over 40.
Oh, yeah, I remember that being huge. Premarin and drugs like that.
Exactly. It was a huge deal, as the sources put it. In 1997, Premarin was literally the #1 prescribed drug in the U.S. Billions of dollars. A massive cash cow.
But that changed, didn't it? Concerns about health risks.
It changed dramatically. The sources say that business largely dried up. The stats are stark. In 1999, something like 27% of U.S. women over 40 were on HRT. Today, it's plummeted to just 4.7%.
Wow.
So yeah, definitely a massive cash cow lost for the drug companies. Concerns about links to cancer and other issues really scared people off, and doctors stopped prescribing it as much. The market just evaporated.
So you've got these giant pharmaceutical companies with factories, equipment, processes all set up for hormone production, and suddenly their main market disappears. What happened to all that capacity? Did it just sit idle?
And that's the critical question the sources jump on. They claim that the very same companies that made cancer-causing HRT drugs, their phrasing, referring to those health concerns, are using the very same factories, machines, and processes to make gender-affirming hormone therapy.
With the exact same infrastructure?
That's the assertion. The supply chains, the manufacturing know-how, it was all there, ready to go. The key difference, highlighted by the sources, is the market. Instead of starting treatment around age 40 for women,
It starts much younger now.
it now begins, according to these sources, in childhood for both sexes. That's a fundamental market shift.
And financially, how does this new market compare to the old HRT market?
Well, the numbers given are pretty telling. In 2023, this gender-affirming hormone market was reportedly worth $1.6 to $1.7 billion. The sources point out that this figure already roughly matches the old HRT revenue, and that's without adjusting for inflation. So a pretty quick replacement.
Common projections.
They expect it to double in the next decade, and at that point, the sources forecast it will have fully replaced the HRT for 40-plus-year-old women. So essentially, they argue the industry pivoted strategically, found a new, potentially even larger and longer-term market for its existing hormone production capabilities, filling that revenue gap.
So putting it all together, what we've walked through today, based entirely on the narrative presented in these sources, is a really complex picture. The core argument seems to be that this major societal shift around trans issues, particularly its acceleration around 2014, wasn't just some spontaneous cultural moment. Long story short, that trans thing didn't just fall from the sky. Instead, these sources weave together threads of, well, historical financial power with some pretty controversial origins in the Pritzker family, combined with strategic political maneuvering involving figures like Obama and this alleged Willie Brown network. And finally, a significant, maybe opportunistic, shift by the pharmaceutical industry to create a new market. It's quite the tapestry they present.
It really is. And I think this deep dive, based on these materials, it really underscores that idea that big societal changes often don't happen in a vacuum, right? These sources are making a case that they can be the result of these deep, interlocking forces, money, politics, industry working together over time, sometimes in ways that aren't immediately obvious. It definitely leaves you wondering, doesn't it, how many other shifts that we kind of accept as just happening might have similar complex, maybe hidden histories behind them. It's certainly a different lens through which to view how society changes.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.